Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to this meeting of the Southern Area Planning Committee. Before we start the meeting, can I remind you of the fire regulations, which are on a screen somewhere? Not behind me at the moment. Oh, right. There we go. The fire regulations. If you hear the alarm, please make sure you know where your nearest exit is and walk down, and we meet over under the canopy at Waitrose. Could you also check your mobile phones, please, and make sure they are switched off or to silent? And can councillors just check that their card is firmly in the machine so that we can actually hear you speak? Just a reminder to the public, I'm sure you're going to be very well behaved tonight, but this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. So we would ask that your contributions are made only if you're public speaking, please, and not during the debate. And can I just introduce the officers, select bunch tonight before we start the meeting. On my far right there is Peter Cleveland, the Head of Development Control, Louise Jandel, who is the Area Team Leader for Southern and Western, and Ryan Snow, Planning Officer. So let's move on to the main items, Emma. The minutes of the last meeting. Are you happy that I signed the minutes of the last meeting? They've been on the table for 30 minutes before this meeting. Agreed. Apologies for absence, please, Emma.
We have apologies from councillors Christian Hesse, Robert Knowles, Stephen Mulliner and Libby Piper. Thanks.
Thank you, Emma. And any declarations of interest?
None before the meeting.
Does anybody wish to add a declaration? We have the usual one for the Hazelmere town councillors. Any questions from the members of the public, Emma?
None received.
So we'll move straight on then to the application for planning permission. We're doing these in the order that is not on your in your papers. We're taking A2 before A1 because logically that is the way they would go. We're looking at the change of use before we look at the following applications. So can you all make sure that you realise we're looking at A2 first of all, that the address is the same, the south side of the street in Dockenfield. So this is an application for the change of use from agricultural to equestrian use at the land centre, and you've got the coordinates there. And this is Ryan, I think, who's going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so this is an application for the change of use from agricultural use to equestrian. We'll start with a location plan. The application site consists mainly of agricultural pasture land. The land features a gentle raise in land levels to the centre. The surrounding area is rural in character, with agricultural units bordering the site to the north, the east and the south, and small semi-rural settlement of Dockenfield approximately 240 metres to the west. Here you can see the aerial photograph, and as you can see there is an unmade track that runs adjacent to the application site, and the application site is also bordered by oak woodland to the south and east. Here are some photographs of the site. The one on the top left shows the access that would be utilised to serve the proposed change of use with the field beyond. The top right photograph shows the application site when viewed from the street facing west, and the bottom photograph also shows the northern edge of the application site when viewed from the street. We go on to some more photographs here showing the application site when viewed from the access gate. Here you can see the change in land levels as it raises towards the centre of the site, and the photograph on the right shows the field with the woodland bordering to the south and east. So in conclusion, the proposed development would not cause material harm to the countryside and would not fail to conserve landscape character of the AGLV. The proposal would be of an acceptable scale and would not impact on the neighbouring occupiers or the surrounding highway network. The matters of principle and technical opinion are the principle of development, lawful use of the land and loss of agricultural use, highways, archaeology, effect on the SPAs and SAC, drainage and flooding, and impact on the SNCI and biodiversity. The matters of judgment are the impact on visual amenity, countryside and AGLV, and the impact on residential amenity. If I could draw members' attention to the update sheet for item A2. Firstly, drawing your attention to the responses from the consultees, the Surrey County Council Lead Local Flood Authority, that raised no objection, and the additional conditions which would preclude the storage of any towed or motorised horse boxes on the site. And the revised recommendation that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 5 and informatives 1 to 5 on the agenda report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ryan. This application is subject to public speaking, and I'll ask, first of all, Mr. Roger Trout, an objector, to speak to us. You come forward. I think Emma has probably shown you the ropes. Yes, you just press when you're comfortable, don't worry, there's no hurry. Just press the large button when you're ready, and your 4 minutes won't start until you press that button and start to speak.
Okay, this change of use is quite clear. It is development outside the settlement of Dockenfield on a greenfield site. There are not farm buildings all the way around the site. It is a severe precedent for Dockenfield parish. Some of you on the site visit have seen the road, part of a sweep of open countryside with no development in the open fields on either side of the road. The site has been farmland for centuries, if not decades, and hay and sheep grazing have occurred till the recent change in ownership. So this is a precedent with a remote owner, with intensive horsekeeping of very expensive, fit, nice animals, rather than just extensive grazing by ponies. The fences that you may have seen yesterday have recently changed from white tape, which they were, to black tape, and I think reduced considerably in extent. Now, approval of equestrian change of use will not just result in a few electric fences. It will have to result in further urbanisation of horticulture by horse-related paraphernalia, including field shelters. You don't keep these animals out in the middle of nowhere for all the year. For each paddock, water tanks, food and hay stores, unless they're going to bring them in from Alton every single day of the year, twice a day. And these are critical welfare infrastructure that has to be used. Now, we're just looking at the change of use here, so those will have to be on site, so it's not just a few electric fences. Everything that event horses need for training, jumping, cross-country, show ring dresser are going to be there. So various apparatus, hard fencing, school ring, etc. You know that if they're not provided on site under this permission, they will have to lorry the animals off every day to somewhere where they can provide it. Now that's interesting in terms of new condition 5 on your just updated sheet. That paraphernalia, will that impact on the open character of the sloping hill countryside? You bet it will. Locally, any horse paraphernalia in the area of Dockenfield is currently located physically beside or inside the local built property. The countryside policies at all levels indicate you should consider this very carefully indeed. And the report has tended to minimise the major significance of countryside policies in this very rural location and concentrate on other, arguably more minor ones. The core planning principles of the NPPF in paragraph 17 is plan-led empowering local people to shape their surroundings. We have some of our local people here. And recognising the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. NPPF 109 states that planning systems should contribute to and enhance the natural and local environment by protecting and enhancing valued landscapes. And that's repeated in your local plan. If this location were not a valued landscape, it would not be AGLV, plus specifically in the list to be upgraded to A and B. So the question is, how would approval protect or enhance? Your council policy C2 explicitly states the countryside will protect it for its own sake, as per the NPPF paragraph, which I've just quoted. So how does this recommended project as defined, so how does the recommendation protect as defined? Gosh, the AGLV C3, how does the recommendation fit the themes? What material considerations override countryside policies? RE1, recognised and safeguarded. The same principle for protecting AO and B applies to AGLV. Does this protect or enhance, and what materially overrides these principles? How does it not detract, RD13, not detract from the character and appearance of the rural area?
Thank you, Dr. Arch. You could do one sentence to sum up if you like.
Sorry, it's the last sentence, yes. This seems to be, unfortunately, a dangerous precedent against all the countryside policies, with a scattering of field shelters, perhaps even a shipping container for storage of materials. Condition 5, very interesting. It will turn into a total mud bath in winter, and the horse paraphernalia will impinge. So please consider and reject.
Thank you, Dr. Trout, and I will be equally as generous to the next public speaker. So if I could ask Nikki Bailey, please, to come forward. Exactly the same, your 4 minutes won't start, and should you overrun, I couldn't do anything other than let you carry on for an extra few seconds. Thank you.
Oh, it's already on. Do I press it again?
No, it's right, just carry on. It won't start the clock.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Nikki Bailey, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my daughter, Tira. The reason we have made this application is so that we can have somewhere safe for us to train our horses. We both enjoy and competed show jumping for many years, but about 6 years ago, Tira had a really serious accident where the horse she was jumping slipped on wet grass as she turned a corner and it fell, crushing her leg. This resulted in a broken tibia and fibia. She had a long spell in hospital afterwards and suffered complications of compartment syndrome, and at one point we thought she was going to lose her leg. It was a terrible time, and I really wouldn't want to have to go through that again. During her long rehab, we decided that for safety's sake, we needed proper facilities, such as a sand school if we were going to be able to train our horses to jump in the future. So we started looking for a suitable field locally, but struggled to find anywhere that was in a nice area with good off-road hacking until we came across this field in Dockenfield, which already has a large equine community. We felt it was perfect in every way, so decided it was worth spending our life savings on. It's such a beautiful field, and we are very proud of it, and hope that we can now realise our dream and progress with our competing, which is what we love to do. We really want our yard to look beautiful and blend into the countryside, so we'll be siting the stables and the sand school close to the hedge at the front, tucked away discreetly so they won't be visible from passers-by. We will also be planting further hawthorn and hazel along the hedgerow to ensure there is a good natural screen. This will be our pride and joy, and we want it to look as nice as possible, and we'll be doing everything to a very high standard. The internal fencing we'll be putting in to separate the paddocks will be green electric tape, not white, which I think really blends in well and is barely visible from the road. We have no need for lighting, as we will not be riding late in the winter, so that is not a consideration. The stables that we would like to build will be dark wood and really good quality, so they will not look out of place in their surroundings. If we sadly do not get the approval we so hope for, we will have to go down the mobile stable route, which I think will really detract from the beauty of our field, as these will need to be moved on a regular basis, as they will become muddy without concrete bases. Having stables available for the horses to come into in bad weather and at night will also mean the fields do not get too poached over the winter months. I feel it is absolutely vital for us to have a small car parking area where we can park our horse box off the road in order to load and unload the horses. Without it, the horse box will get stuck if we drive into the field in wet weather. Parking the horse box on the road is so dangerous, as there is always the risk of horses getting loose on the road or other motorists having to overtake a large parked vehicle whilst the animals are being loaded. Indeed, if we have our sand school, we will not need to transport the horses around as much as we do now, as every time we want to jump them, we have to load them up and take them either to our instructor's yard or hire somewhere else. Therefore, the only traffic coming to the yard will be mine and my daughter's cars once or twice a day, which I don't feel is a significant increase in traffic through the village. We will be making arrangements for a local farmer who also supplies our hay to collect the horse manure on a regular basis to prevent the muck heap becoming unsightly and hazardous. And we only live 10 minutes away, so don't feel we will need to have toilet facilities on site, as we won't normally be there for longer than a couple of hours at a time. Should this change, then we can arrange for a portaloo on site. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Could I ask you to turn it off? Thank you. Oops. Thank you very much indeed. Right, members, over to you. Councillor Round.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've visited the site this afternoon, and I must say I knew the area anyway. I know it reasonably well, and it is a charming part of countryside, and I'm sure we would all want to protect it. But I've also, living in Hazlemere for decades, been surrounded by horses, horse culture, people driving up to feed them, and a sand school. And I think they're quite acceptable as part of the rural scene. It might be a bit of a stretch of the imagination to say it would enhance it, but I certainly think it fits. And I know a lot of people have written to, maybe my colleagues as well, to object to this application, but in my view, it looks okay. Thank you.
In the absence of anybody else asking a question, oh, right, well, I'll come in later then. Councillor King.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Chairman, I wasn't asleep, I promise. My point is on the condition 5, which we've got on our update sheet, and I'd really like a little bit of clarity on it, please. Talks about no outside storage, which is fine, including towed or motorised horse boxes should be stationed, stored, or otherwise parked. Now, to me, that seems like it can't be on the site at all, full stop, end of story, which doesn't quite tie with Ms Bailey's comment. I'd be grateful if the officers could comment, please.
Thank you. I would suggest actually amendment to that condition to say overnight, so that it's reasonable for those vehicles to be parked there during the day when they're using the facility, but it's more the long-term storage that we would be concerned about because of the visual impact in the long term. Thank you.
Sorry, did you indicate, Councillor Adams? Yeah.
Yes, I'm inclined to support the parish council. I believe that this is a very open area. It is, as been stated, a candidate for the AONB. If you start putting these structures up on all of these fields around there, it would change it very quickly. I think there is an issue with the material that the ground rather of the site, where it's considerable amount of clay there, and frequent use of the horsing galloping around there will churn it up. We do get periods of significant rain. Even in the bridleway runs past my house, we get the bridleway churned up quite quickly by just a few horses riding around it. So I'm inclined to support the parish council and support the objectors.
Councillor Inchbald.
Thank you, Chairman. If it was just a matter of there being 4 horses in the field, I don't think I could possibly object because although I've lived in the country all my life, there isn't a significant difference between a cow and a horse when it comes to the scene. However, horses in a field like that are, as one of the objectors has pointed out, going to mean an awful lot of other things as well. And I do think that is leading us down a rather dangerous road. I am not keen on this at all, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to comment? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. This is very, very difficult, and I can understand the needs of the applicants with regard to wanting their horses and all the buildings, etc., and a place to go to do these wonderful things. However, it's becoming apparent throughout our area, throughout the borough and the south. Yeah. Local people need to be involved in any planning issues of this nature. Okay? They're the important people that are going to shape the place where they live and work. And I don't think this is going to add in a positive way to shaping the area. I think it sets a very dangerous precedent. We heard from the objector many reasons why we should object, and they're very sound reasons. And I, for one, will not, although I understand the applicant's needs and wishes, I cannot support the officers on this matter. Thank you.
If nobody else wishes to, I'll come in at this point. Do you wish to go?
Yeah, after you.
Oh, right. Yes, I feel very strongly about this particular area because really of my experience. I live probably closer to this site than anybody else in this room at the moment, apart from the people in the gallery. And I am, as anyone who's read the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan would know, I'm very opposed to coalescence. It means the one thing that we found when we were doing our neighbourhood plan, that people are very proud of their village, proud of their area. And what we have had in the south of Farnham is a gradual, if you like, absorption of villages into Farnham. I'm sure this has happened in other settlements as well. We still have some villages that are discrete. Rowledge is now, we're still trying to keep Rowledge and Frensham from joining up in our plan. But Frensham stays at the moment, and Dockenfield, as discrete villages. And quite frankly, I think they should stay discrete. When you drive from where I live to get to this site, you go through Frensham, through that bit, past the church, and then you have this sweep, and it is lovely. When we drove down it yesterday, absolutely beautiful. Both sides of the road is beautiful, and then you come to Dockenfield. So you have a village and a green space, a beautiful green space, as Councillor Adams says. It is candidate. Well, that was really going to be my first question, just to make sure we are defining this field completely accurately. But there is no doubt that it's a beautiful field, and it separates these two villages. We have a choice, really. You know, we can join the whole of the borough up, anything that's not protected by green belts, and I think that would be extremely sad. It is very hard to protect land, but I actually think in this particular case, and I do have sympathy with the applicants, I'm sure they have looked long and hard, but I just feel that to change this use, knowing what is going to be put on this field, would have a detrimental effect, actually on both villages, because ultimately if you join the village up, you've then got Dockenfield and Frensham as one village, and then if we allow it to join into Farnham, we just have a greater Farnham with all the villages just tagged on. And it's not really, I think, as Councillor Edwards just said, what any of the local people, either in the south of Farnham and certainly in the villages of Frensham and Dockenfield, would want to see. Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you very much, Joan. This is an area of great landscape value. We all know that. It's outside the village settlement. I do not wish to see villages that are separated by green open space joined together. It's ribbon development that I find is, this part of Surrey should remain as beautiful as it is. We can't just concrete over the whole thing. The visual amenity is going to be spoilt quite severely. I find the residents of Dockenfield have inundated my computer with their comments. I said jokingly earlier, I think the only two people in Dockenfield who didn't send me an email were on holiday somewhere abroad without internet access. But that's joking aside. I do think this is a step too far, and I certainly support the parish council in their comments entirely. I wish I was as eloquent as our chairman, but I echo her thoughts as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Would the officers like to come back with some of the points?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. just sort of listening to this sort of discussion and the issues that raised, I think from what's been the points put forward, we need to be clear the application we're looking at. There's no above ground operational development. You're looking purely at the change of use. I can understand some of the comments you're making that could be relevant to the second item on the agenda tonight, but you're purely looking at the change of use of the field. And some of the concern is relating to the paraphernalia that would be associated with the change of use. But what I would just offer as advice is that, you know, sort of temporary or movable field shelters, things along those lines, could actually be put on the site in any case. That wouldn't stop them doing that. So you do need to be aware of that in terms of what we're looking at, and fencing. There's permitted development rights that allow construction of fencing. So just to be aware of that. And I think Councillor Inchbold actually covered it quite well in terms of you're looking at the change of type of animal that's going to be in that field. That's purely what this part of the application for. And I think we're looking at with two different things. We've clearly got one application for change of use, which is no operational development other than the change of use, no above ground development, and then second on the agenda, which we're looking at over and above that, will be the construction of buildings, which will have a different visual impact. So just to be mindful of that. I think that's all I can sort of really add to that, and I don't think a change of use, as on this current application, in my view, would result in coalescence, but I appreciate those comments could be relevant to some of the built form associated. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, if I could just go back, I'll take you in a minute. I'm totally confused now. I'm not confused about the fact that we have two applications. And it's very difficult to separate them because they're on the same papers, and we know that one will lead to another. Now, I think we'll need some more guidance than you've already given us, Peter, if you just have a think when I take Councillor round, as to exactly what we are allowed to do, because obviously at the back of our mind is what's going to happen on the site if we give the change of use. And, you know, it's a situation we don't really want to be in. So I think we need some slightly firmer advice on that one. Councillor Round?
Thank you, Chair. And I was going to ask the same clarification because, as one of my colleagues, I think it was Councillor Inchbold, said a horse and a cow are similar size and they eat the same stuff. Although I know from my experience they treat the ground differently. I'd rather have cows. If horses are just there grazing, is that allowable at the moment?
Yes.
So change of use means the right to ride your horse? What exactly, please? We should probably have asked this question at the outset.
Peter, can you answer that and help us to work out exactly what we can and can't do in this application?
Yeah. Sorry if I confused you first time around, but yeah, that's entirely the effect. So they could graze them on this land without the need planning permission, but what we would be allowing them to use it for exercising them, riding it around the site, as well as the grazing, which, as I say, they could do in any instance. What we've got is two separate decisions. So you could quite correctly make a decision on one application which you didn't think was harmful and make a different decision on the other which results in built form. So you do need to separate them out. We have two different applications. Whilst they are linked to one another, we have ordered it so we've presented you the change of use which doesn't result in the built form above ground first to consider, and then the second decision needs to consider whether the ancillary uses associated with that change of use could be acceptable as well on top of that change of use of land.
Could I ask the question a slightly different way, though, then? This is a change of use, and they've had to apply for a change of use. So on what grounds, I mean, why have they had to come in for a change of use? On what grounds can you refuse a change of use or accept a change of use? If it's a big enough change for it to have to come in for planning permission, there must be reasons why you should or shouldn't support it. And I'm not clear exactly what we are making a decision on, or what grounds we can be making the decision on.
Ultimately, from that change of use, you would need to identify direct harm resulting from that change of use. So going from grazing land, which can be used for agricultural purposes, or grazing of horses, to a use that allows purely for grazing of horses and exercising of horses on those lands. So you'd need to demonstrate what harm would result from that change of use, and that's specific. It's a small change of use. It's not a significant change, and that's why it's difficult to be clear on that. But that's the ultimate position.
Councillor Adams.
So, if this change of use was granted, then they would not be able to bring any cars, vehicles, or horse boxes onto the land. There would be no parking. There would be no additional road making or track making to keep vehicles there or turn vehicles round. It would just allow them to ride the horses and put up jumps.
Are you going to confirm that, Peter? Is that,
yes, I was waiting for you to. That's effectively correct, but the same with any agricultural field. To deliver livestock to it or to deliver horses to it, you'd be able to drive into the site, unload them and drive off. If, as you say, they were going to be putting jumps and things associated with that, that would result in looking at the change of use if it was permanent. But you would be able to deliver whatever animals they are to the site in a vehicle that's appropriate for that, drop them off and then leave. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Peter. Can you just clarify our old policy on horse keeping? I mean, it's these difficult words. You know, the proposal would not significantly detract from the character and would not give rise to significant noise and disturbance. And, you know, this is the older policy. I appreciate that. I just don't fully understand how a field of sheep is the same as the constant toing and froing of a horse box. Now, you know, this is going to happen because horses are moved, aren't they? I mean, I know you've got to bring the sheep at some point, but they tend to be there for a long time. I mean, I'm just trying to get the intrinsic difference between what we're being asked to change to. I mean, if it were just a question of, it's like playing with those farm animals as a child, isn't it? Putting horses where there were sheep. I agree, you know, but we're talking about a much more intensive use of what is at the moment a very ordinary but beautiful green field. And I just wondered, you know, what I'm still trying to get to is why they need a change of use if nothing is going to change, you know, which you seem to be saying, you know, a sheep or horse is all the same thing. But, you know, there has to be some reason for it, otherwise they wouldn't have to apply for a change of use. So is it the intensification of vehicles? Is it the hard standing for parking the horse boxes? I mean, what is the harm that a horse use is different from a normal agricultural use, is what I'm trying to get at.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've probably highlighted what you consider to be the harm is the intensification of use, people coming and going to the site and delivering horses to it. I think that's the first sort of comment, and specifically relating to this application, you've highlighted where you think there's a difference and you think that results in the harm. The clear distinction is I haven't been clear and I don't think it's been helpful, so apologies for that, but I think the clear distinction is at the moment they could come and drop them off, leave them to graze and then pick them up, take them away to stabling. If you result in the change of use, that would mean that they could drop them off there, ride them around the site sort of, from that point of view. And,
sorry, members of the public, please don't contribute.
Yeah, and it would allow them to use it for the recreational purposes associated with that.
Right, I've got... Oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Adams now, Councillor Round and Councillor Edwards. Councillor Round, do you want to come back and I'll take you, Councillor Edwards?
Very briefly, I'm still a bit confused. I think the gentleman said that if the horse is ridden, is exercised, then that would be a change of use. Certainly I can see it if you do a lot of it and you've got jumps there and fence and all the rest of it, then that is a change of use. But if you're just riding a horse, what happens if you ride... I mean, I don't have a horse and I can't ride. All right? What happens if you ride your horse across a friend's field? Is that illegal because he hasn't got equestrian rights, equestrian usage?
Yeah, it's intensity of the use. If you just rode across a field one off, then you know that's just riding across that. Obviously, there's got to be a right of access or a public right-of-way to take you through there, and then that's different. But if you were just to ride across a one-off field, that wouldn't require planning permission. It's the intensity of the use for that purpose.
Councillor Edwards?
Just for absolute clarity here, okay, I'm still confused. If I was the owner, and what difference would it make to me if I didn't have change of use to what I could do and what I couldn't do? So what does it allow me to do if I get change of use from agricultural? Just so I can get it in my mind here.
Thank you. In effect, they'd be able to use it for that recreational purpose associated with equestrian, with exercising and taking them around those fields, and if they were to be using temporary jumps. So, yeah.
I think we better move to the recommendation and just hope that we can make the right decision and actually have some help from the officers if we need it to make sure we've made the right decision. Sorry, Peter, Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you, Chairman. The NPPF states that planning systems should contribute to and enhance the natural and local environment by protecting and enhancing valued landscapes. And I think what we are seeing here does not do that. So, in my view, C3 does apply. Thank you.
Right, I think I've got the recommendation at least. So shall we move then to the recommendation? It's the revised recommendation on the update sheet. That permission be granted, this is for the change of use, subject to conditions 1 to 4 as in your papers, the additional number 5 with the extra word overnight, as agreed on, as put condition 5 on your update sheet. Oh, as amended for the overnight, yeah. So, is that agreed? Can I see all those in favour of granting permission, please?
1.
And all those against granting permission?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
Thank you. So that is lost. So could I have an alternative recommendation, please, with a seconder? Anyone got an alternative? Just a simple recommendation first, please. Councillor King.
We're going to squabble over who does it. I think Councillor Isherwood put it very well. I think policy C3.
Sorry, can I just get the recommendation first?
Oh, sorry. Recommendation that it be refused.
Thank you, Councillor King. Do you have a seconder for that recommendation?
Sure Councillor Adams will second it.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Right. OK, I'll come back to you now. Councillor King, some reasons, please, for refusal.
C3, covering the intrinsic value of the countryside. I don't believe this will enhance the character at all, as Councillor Isherwood eloquently mentioned. I think it's a greenfield site within the AGLV. Policy C2 also protects the countryside for its own sake, and I think that's an important matter to cover. And I'm sure my colleagues can think of far better, more eloquent ones than me.
Officers, could you comment so far and let us know if we're on the right lines for this?
Okay, what you haven't done is identified what the actual harm was, but from the previous discussion, I think that was really from the intensification of the vehicular movements to and from the site. So I would suggest the proposal as a result of the intensification of vehicular movements to and from the site would fail to enhance and would cause material harm to the intrinsic character, beauty and openness of the countryside and the area of great landscape value. The proposal would be contrary to policies C2 and C3 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan 2002 and policies RE1 and RE3 of the Draft Local Plan Part 1. Thank you.
Gosh, that seems to have covered most of it. Is there anything else, Councillor Adams?
Yes, I'd just like to add the infrastructure that's required for horses to be left on the field. So they would require a watering facility, they would require a feeding facility.
True.
Makes a nice change from sewage, but I've never discussed cows and sheep quite so often at a planning meeting. Louise, is that a possibility?
I would just caution you against that. The reason being is that grazing can take place on the site and they would require water troughs, etc. So really you're not identifying additional harm from what this actual use is.
Right, so we have a revised recommendation with the reasons that Louise eloquently read out for us. I think they sum up everything that people have said. So could I see, please, all those in favour of refusing this application? Will you please show?
That's 6.
And those opposed to that recommendation? So that's permission is refused. We now have the question of the second application, and I'm going to ask for some clarification here from the officers. Louise, I think, is going to clarify the situation because obviously circumstances have changed.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. The agenda report for this item was prepared on the basis that the permission for the change of use of the site from agriculture to equestrian was acceptable in principle. The decision that members have just made on item A2 is now a material consideration that must be given weight in this new application. As outlined in the agenda report, there would be a minor impact on the landscape as a result of the erection of the stable and sand school. It was considered reasonable in that report that a stable was required for the equestrian use of the site, and the minor impact on the landscape was outweighed by that justified need. No information has been submitted with the application to demonstrate that the development is required for agriculture, which is the lawful use of the site, as the equestrian use has just been refused. Officers therefore consider that the minor adverse impact on the landscape would not be outweighed by any benefits now that permission has been refused for the equestrian use. On the basis of this earlier decision, the officer recommendation would need to be amended for refusal, and as such, it's recommended that members delegate the decision back to officers to make the decision under delegated authority in the office. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, this is new territory for me. Do we have to vote on anything or just on the delegation back to you? But we don't need to make a decision on the application because that's got to be updated. Okay? So, members, yes, Councillor Inchbald?
Is it still open to us to say what our view of this application is?
In fact, that would be particularly helpful because officers can then take that into consideration when making a new revised recommendation.
I take it from that, Chairman, that we can actually now debate it.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I thought we were delegating it back rather than having a full debate on it. I can't see the point of a mini debate. I can see the point of your talking to the officers about it. But, you know, either we're going to debate it fully and make a decision, or we're going to delegate it to the officers for them to make the decision. And it'll be a changed report. So we'll be making a decision on a report that's going to change anyway because of the circumstances. So, you know, I would rather just make it clear that we're not actually debating that one tonight. We're delegating it to the officers. But this committee has a right, if not a duty, to inform the officers of what they would like to say. I think that would be a better way of doing it. I mean, I'll say half-baked sounds awfully rude, but, you know, not a full discussion seems to me a bit pointless at this stage. But I'm open to suggestions, Councillor Inchbald.
Well, I just feel that it would be helpful if we could express our views on this application as well. I don't know what my colleagues feel.
I mean, my point is, you can make you can speak to the officers as they're doing the the delegated decision. I can't see. I don't see the two things are possible. Either we debate it and make a decision, or we delegate it to the officers and let them make the decision, which we can inform.
So, Chairman, all I was going to say is if you want to debate it, or if the view of the committee want to debate it, we will need to present it to you. The concern we've got is the way the report is addressed to you doesn't take into account the consideration you've just got, and so the advice in the report would ultimately be different to members. So you'd be debating something that you've got alternate advice on within your officer report. So the option is to defer it to officers in consultation with the chairman, or defer it to bring it back to committee. But obviously we're recommending deferral to officers in consultation with the chairman on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Inchbald?
Well, I'm sure we don't want to get into a big muddle, so perhaps we better delegate it to the officers and all go home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inchbald. Do we need to vote on that, Emma?
Yes.
Right. Can we take a vote on the decision to defer this to delegate this application to the officers for their decision, and that anybody who wishes to make representations can do so directly to the officers, and obviously I will also speak to the officers. So can I see all those please in favour of delegating the next decision, the decision A1, to the officers? Those please show.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, and as Councillor Inchbald said, that concludes the meeting, and you can all go home. So thank you very much indeed.